What up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Dan Casper here with you, a loaded episode of the Man Cave Podcast. We're going to talk some Badgers with R.J Cardinal. We're going to talk some Packers with Joe Daguanno, and that's where we lead off this episode of the podcast, Talking Some Packers. We officially begin self-scouting, our version of self-scouting. If we were like consultants and Matt LaFleur reached out to us, or Brian Gutekunst, or Mark Murphy, or whoever the hell at 1265 Lombardi Avenue reached out to us and said, give us your feedback. Give us a little consulting on the past season, on our coaching staff, on our players. What are your thoughts on that? So we kick it off talking about the coaching staff. Obviously, the big question mark is going to be the defensive side and Joe Barry, right? We know that. Offensively, I think before we get to the defensive side, offensively, I think, in my opinion at least, we saw a lot of growth from this group. Talked a lot about it yesterday, position coaches-wise. Jason Vrabel, I thought, did a fantastic job. The wide receivers coach, tight ends coach, Butkus, offensive line, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Matt LaFleur even as a play caller. Fantastic job, which Matt LaFleur also yesterday did say it's not completely out of the realm that he would give up play calling if he thought it was better for the team. And, he did say it's a very collaborative group, very collaborative effort. I'd still be surprised if that happened. I think it would have to be I don't know. The way the season ended, and I don't even know if I'd want LaFleur at this point to give up play calling, because I thought he was in such a zone. I want to see that continue to grow there. But offensively, offensive coaches, you get passing grades in my opinion. At the beginning of the year, it was a struggle. There was a lot of, I think, trying to figure stuff out, trying to put people in a position to succeed, to best positively affect games, and they finally, I think, figured everything out. And I want to see this group. We talk about the young receivers and the tight ends and growing with Jordan Love and building something there. I also think that's related to some of these coaches and to play caller too. So we talk about the growing of this quarterback and his receivers and pass catchers growing together. But we don't really necessarily kind of like factor in the play caller and the coaches in this too. So I think as a collective group with these coaches, with these offensive coaches, I want all those guys back. I think they were on to something. I want to see this continue to grow from the offensive side of things. And I thought Matt LaFleur got better as the season progressed. We've talked about how many times it's been written about, how many times it's been out there. When they finally said, okay, let's let it rip, they took it up the next level. They figured it out. And I want to see them continue to grow and build upon that. Special teams is such an interesting one here. And obviously I'm holding defense to the end here. You've got the highest paid special teams coordinator in the league. He's your assistant head coach. It was clearly evident LaFleur utilized Rich Bisaccia, I think, more during the game, not just special teams, but a lot of times you saw Bisaccia next to LaFleur, and they were kind of, probably talking with each other and just trying to figure out something kind of as we said, LaFleur said it's a very collaborative group. Got to imagine he was kind of getting some input, insight from Bisaccia and such. You look at special teams numbers, they weren't great. Obviously, a lot of people are going to talk about Anders Carlson. They're going to focus on that. But you look at penalties, and you look at overall rankings, they weren't good. Now, is that because they were incredibly young? Were they plugged in a lot of inexperience on there? Possibly. That's probably part of it. Was it coaching? Probably. Possibly. Probably a mixture of everything over there. I mean, honestly, the one positive, and a lot of positives in here, but the one positive from special teams is probably Keyshawn Nixon again. Another all-pro year there in a game now that, teams, the NFL, sure seems like they're trying to eliminate kickoffs and kick returns and such. So, I mean, you got an all-pro kick returner there that, didn't have multiple kick returns for touchdowns. But that's probably your one thumbs up area is Keyshawn Nixon. I don't think Rich Bisaccia is gone unless another team hires him away. I think this was also a year where they had a lot of younger guys in there. And maybe kind of, hey, this is what you're given. This is what the front office gave them. This is what you got. Okay? Got to work with it. You got to mold it. Got to try to figure something out there. It wasn't a great year by any means. But I don't see the Packers firing Bisaccia or anything like that. But they do got to get better in that department. Whether it's, a year where it was just a lot of inexperience on there, they're going to get better with more experience and such. Whether they got to get more veterans in there. Rudy Ford was initially brought in a couple of years ago. Special teams guy, was a veteran guy. A lot of experience there. He missed a ton of time this year, injury, and then, he's a starting safety, so maybe not logging as many snaps on the special teams. You take some talent out of there. Dallin Leavitt, cut. They were missing some of their veterans from a year ago, where they brought in to kind of help that group. Well, it went a little bit of a younger route this year. So let's just get to the meat of it now. Defense. What do you do? The big question mark. I believe, not everybody, because we've heard from some who say, no, they don't want to see Barry move on. They don't think he deserves to move on. Or get fired, I should say. But I believe the majority, PR-wise, would like to maybe see Green Bay move on from Joe Barry. And if it's announced that he's returning, I got to imagine the comments on Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and Instagram, social media, whatever the heck it may be, majority will probably not be in favor of that move. Will probably not be in favor of that move. But would it be the right move? What is the right move in this situation? I think with looking at the last couple of years, when we look at last year, not this past season, the year before, where the defense started off slow, got better down the stretch, all offseason leading into this season. You heard, we got to start off faster. And, when you look at the beginning of the year, if we go back to our conversations, there was a lot of times like, hey, defense wasn't the problem. It almost felt like a little bit of the opposite. Like the defense played well enough in some of the games to keep the offense in it. It was just that was the time when the offense was really struggling, couldn't find their footing, couldn't get it going. It wasn't very good complementary football. And then it was like, okay, once the offense started to kind of figure it out or started to maybe turn the page a little bit, then the defense took a step back. A lot of the coaches and people look at that Pittsburgh game, even though it was a loss. You heard Adam Stenavich, you've heard other players talk about it. It's like, okay, that was kind of a moment where they started to see me, offensively, maybe things started to click. But what also happened in that game was when Matt Canada outcoached Joe Barry. It's like, oh, dang. Then, got a little better against Detroit, Kansas City, and then it was the Giants and Tampa Bay and Carolina. Those three games there. Essentially, I think for a lot of people, sealed the fate that Barry's out. And then Minnesota, defense bounces back. Chicago, do a good job. Dallas, yep. Heck, even the 49ers. This is what probably pains. I saw this yesterday. And either I kind of forgot about it, missed it, or just wanted to refuse to believe it. The 49ers offense in that game, if you really want to kind of get a little bit more painful here, the 49ers offense in that game didn't take a single snap inside the red zone until that final drive. and this is from J.R. Radcliffe, too, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, who we've had on. He said, heck, they didn't even have a snap inside the 30 before that final drive. They kept the 49ers out of the red zone, outside the 30, up until that final drive. Now, like, well, how did they score? A couple touchdowns there. Big plays, George Kittle, McCaffrey, big run, and, that sort of stuff. I think this is a tough, for me personally, if I'm trying to channel Matthew LaFleur, I think this is a tough decision for him because there's been moments where this defense has played better. They've had moments. But my issue with this whole thing has just been the consistency part of it. It's been the consistency. Why can we do it 1 week or a couple weeks and then not the next? And I know maybe some people are thinking, why can the defense play up to the competition but maybe play down to the competition? This defense is it's probably been one of the most confusing things throughout this whole season, throughout this entire season. It's like we've seen some really good moments. They do really well against, some top-tier quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes or whatever, but then Tommy DeVito goes in there and wins NFC Player of the Week and then follows it up with Baker Mayfield having a perfect quarterback rating, and he's NFC Player of the Week. So it's like if you can slow down Patrick Mahomes and these quarterbacks, why can't you do it with that? The consistency part of it, for me, is what's kind of mind-boggling a little bit. And for me personally, I talked a little bit about it the other day. The NFL is so circular. Like, last few years, it's been the Shanahan style of offense that has been giving defenses fits all over the board. Been giving them fits. Now, you're kind of seeing, hey, the Ravens, maybe they've figured that out because you look at some of their games where they've gone up against the 49ers. Houston the other day in the postseason. Bobby Slowick runs a Shanahan-style offense. Ravens have been doing a fantastic job of slowing that stuff down. Do teams maybe now want a little bit of piece of what McDonald, defensive coordinator for the Ravens, is doing? What has he done, or what has he seen that could kind of slow down those styles of offenses a little bit? If it were me, I think it's best for both parties to move on. I think it's best for Green Bay to move on from Barry. And as much as Joe Barry probably wants to be a defensive coordinator and such, I can't get over, what he said a few weeks ago in a presser saying it's been really tough on me and my family, when they were going through that stretch. You kind of throw that out there and you kind of, and I'm sure it was. But I think now that you kind of go out there and say that publicly, I don't know. To me, I think it's probably best for both sides to be like, you know what? Maybe it is best for both of us to kind of move on at that point. It could be a good decision for both sides. Maybe a little bit down for Barry because he's probably not going to get a defensive coordinator position again. But I ultimately think it's probably best for both to move on. Just my opinion. So if that's the case, where do you go? Let's throw some names out there that's not going to happen. Bill Belichick is not going to take a defensive coordinator job this year. Is that a dream scenario? It is 100% a dream scenario. Bill Belichick is not interested in going down to a defensive coordinator. He wants to break down Shula's record for wins. And I'm sure there's probably a little bit of a motivating factor for him, too, to prove that he can win without Tom Brady. Belichick is not going to be a defensive coordinator. So we can cross that name off the list. That ain't going to happen. And honestly, if you are a head coach, I don't know if you'd want Bill Belichick as your assistant because you're probably looking over your shoulder every single time, and it just might be kind of a weird, tense organization, coaches meetings, all that sort of stuff. It's like Richard Pitino coaching and he's got his dad, Rick, behind the bench over there. Bill ain't going to be that. We can erase that name off over there. Vrabel would be an interesting one because Matt LaFleur was his offensive coordinator for a year. They know each other. They know how each other operate. I wouldn't completely ignore it, but I don't know if Vrabel also would be a guy that would just take a defensive coordinator job at this point. Maybe. I guess never say maybe. But I also feel like, okay, you bring in a guy like Vrabel, that might be just a one-year type of deal. Because he's going to be in head coaching conversations until he gets his next one. Whether it's this year or maybe next year. So, do you want a head coach or do you want a defensive coordinator to come in for a one-year spot? Or would you like to say, hey, I want to build something here. Looking for somebody maybe for a couple years at least. And that all could change. I mean, if you go out there and you get a young hotshot defensive coordinator, they come in and do a fantastic job right away, yeah, they're going to get head coaching interviews. It's just going to happen. That's how the NFL works. So while LaFleur and Vrabel know each other very well, I don't know if he would take a defensive coordinator job right now. Could be wrong, but I don't know. I'm looking at some of the assistants out there. Mentioned Weaver yesterday from the Ravens. I think that would be an intriguing one. He's getting head coaching interviews, though. But if he wants to maybe add, he was defense coordinator for a hot minute there in Houston. But if he wants to maybe, get back to calling some defensive plays, could that be an option? I'd be good with that one. Anthony Weaver with Baltimore. Chris Harris, former Bears defensive back, was with the Titans. He's getting another one, or he's getting an interview for the Bears for their defensive coordinator position. He interviewed for the Packers during that round where they hired Joe Barry, was one of the finalists too. Could that be an option there? First-time defensive coordinator. He's well-respected across the league. I've seen some people talk about Johnny Holland from the 49ers. The only thing I would say about Johnny Holland, and I don't know if this would be a factor, but the only thing I would say is he is got some health stuff. He's been battling cancer. There was a couple weeks ago, a few weeks ago, there was even a thing about it. I think on one of the pregame shows. But he is battling cancer. Would that be something where, he wants to move, take on another role, take on another job with his health stuff? Maybe, possibly. I don't know. But I'm just saying out there that could be a factor in his own personal decision out there too. Because I know I've mentioned Holland a couple years ago with that. You got your veteran for Ejiro Evero. Could that be an option out there? He's getting head coaching interviews. He's getting second round head coaching interviews over there. Young coach, well respected across the league. There's a Wink Martindale. He's got a big personality, but he's getting some talk about maybe potentially going over to Philly. That guy just seems like he would fit perfectly in Philly over there. But maybe, does it matter to you personally? Do you want a guy who's maybe a veteran defensive coordinator, a guy who's gotten a lot of coordinating experience? Bring him in, or do you want a first-timer, maybe a younger guy coming in, maybe relates to the players a little bit more? Run with that route. We've seen examples of each side working before, haven't we? We've seen it. I personally feel like I'm not as confident as I was after Tampa or, in December. I'm not as confident when I said I think, Barry's done. He ain't coming back next year. It's not happening. I'm not as confident as I was when I first said that, but I still ultimately feel like that decision will be made to mutually part ways. They'll move on. And Matt LaFleur will be looking for another defensive coordinator, his third defensive coordinator. Remember, because when he first got hired, he was given Mike Pett. Made the move after an NFC Championship game to bring in Joe Barry. Jim Leonhard, I think that train has moved on. I think that ship has sailed. I mean, you're not even hearing his name right now. I mean, it could change with some of the new staffs coming in, but his name, you don't even hear it anymore. And I don't know if it's because he's just wanting to stick in the college world. Maybe it's kind of one of those underground sort of things. I guess never say never, but, he had a shot to do it and turned it down. Didn't want to do it. Would he revisit that? Does he regret it? Maybe, possibly. But I think that ship has sailed at this point in time. But I do ultimately feel like Green Bay is going to make a move for a new defensive coordinator. And I hope the one thing is, and I get it, you see it all across the coaching world. Do you hire guys that you know or have a connection with because then you have a good working relationship? You have the positives and negatives of that then. Or do you bring in a guy who you have no relationship with, you don't even know anything about, you bring him in, yet, that's a risk too because that's what Brian Daboll did with Wink Martindale, and apparently they butted heads, and that's why they're no longer working together, that sort of stuff. There's different ways to it. There's positives and negatives, good examples, bad examples, all across the board. I just want LaFleur, when he opens up that process, if he opens up that process, which I think he will, do your research, look all across the league, not just dudes that maybe you got a connection with, got a little bit of a relationship with. I get it. It would make, inside the building, the transition, a little bit easier, communication, maybe a little bit easier. But this is perhaps Matt LaFleur's biggest decision, biggest hire, biggest move that he'll be making in his young career up until this point. He's got to get the defensive coordinator pick right. The offense is trending upward. They're going to continue to grow. They're going to continue to get better. Defensively, they've got veterans. They've got some nice veterans over there. They got some nice pieces over there. This is a group that still needs to lead the way. And you got to build upon that. There's been so much invested in that group. And have we gotten the max out of that? I mean, I'll even go into, you look at Rashawn Gary. He kind of got quiet down the stretch. Was that Rashawn Gary? Was that scheme? Was it teams really preparing and focusing on 52? Yeah, part of it is. But that's also part of, Packers trying to figure out, okay, ways to still get him involved in games. Because you know what? Teams prepare for T.J. Watt, and he still gets after it. Teams prepare for Bosa, and he still gets after it. Ultimately, I do think a move will be made. I think you're going to see some movements across the defensive coaching staff. You're going to see some new names. I do think there will be a new defensive coordinator. And I just think it's one of those moves right now. While the defense did play better, and by all accounts, players like Joe Barry, they got a good relationship with him. I just think it's beneficial for both sides to mutually part ways. And this will be a very, very, very big decision for Matt LaFleur to get this one right. Let's take a quick break. We'll talk some more Packers with Joey D after these quick words. It's that time of year where we may be stuck indoors for a bit, so you need to make sure your pantries, fridge, and freezers are fully stocked. How do you do that while also saving some money? Easy. Just shop at Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Whether it's stocking the pantry with soups or dried goods, or loading up the deep freezer with pizzas and frozen foods, Hy-Vee has the best selection to help keep you stocked during the winter months. And with their Hy-Vee perks, you'll save money at the register and the gas pump. Stock up on your favorite grocery items and save money with Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Let's chat a little bit with Joe Daguanno. So, Joe, I'll ask you the question, not necessarily do you want him back or not, but do you think he will be brought back?
It's interesting because you look at LaFleur's presser, and I listened see yesterday, Captain, and you said if you're looking for any kind of a concrete, here's what we're going to do with Joe Barry, you weren't going to get it, and that was obviously the truth. But what you try to read between the lines, and you try to compare it to previous years and end of season pressers with LaFleur, and LaFleur left the door open. He at least left the door open, unlike other seasons when he unequivocally said, no, I don't see any reason why he should go, et cetera, et cetera. So he left the door open, and he is going to make that decision. Now, I would say it's a 25% chance that Joe Barry gets fired. And I think this is a defining moment in Matt LaFleur's career. And you and I have talked about this now ad nauseum, that this is one of those things you say to yourself, as a head coach, do you have the global perspective to look at your team? And I get it. Joe Barry, he seems to be liked from a lot of the players. He's a guy that according to most, is a likable, high-energy type of guy. And so I think more than likely he comes back. And like I said, I think there's about a 25% chance he gets fired. But, this is going to really be, again, this will probably define Matt LaFleur once again. And we've talked about the growth. And I know yesterday you talked a lot about the growth of Matt LaFleur. And you and I and a lot of other people very hard on him during the rough stretches this year. And I think rightfully so. But I think Matt LaFleur grew as a coach, as a during the week coach, as a in-game coach. Now it's, does he have that global perspective to do what's right from a coaching standpoint, the people working for him. So, time will tell. We will see. But if it were me, if I was Matt LaFleur, I would cut ties. And I would say, Joe, I just think, it's better for you, it's better for us that we need a fresh start. And too many inconsistencies. There's just way too many inconsistencies from that defense this year. You thought, all right, they have a great game, and then the next game, they seem to have the wrong scheme. And you look at the game against the 49ers, and look, I thought for the most part, the Packer defense played well. And if the Packer defense makes a couple of plays, catches the interceptions, those types of things, I think Green Bay moves on. But the defining drive, and you go back to the Giant game with DeVito, the defining drive, Green Bay can't shut it down. Conversely, defining drive for the 49er defense, and again, Jordan Love should not have thrown that, but they get credit for the stop. And so, again, if it were me, I would make the move. I just don't think, odds are Matt LaFleur doesn't.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with you. If it were me, I make the move. I agree with you. I think, you mentioned the consistency thing. That's been my biggest thing. And it just feels like if it were me again, like it's beneficial for both sides, especially, a few weeks ago when Barry goes out in a presser and acknowledges how hard it's been for him and his family, listening to all the negative talk and questioning about his job. And it's like, okay, I get that, but was that necessarily the appropriate time to maybe say that in the media? And I just feel like it's one of those situations where it might be better for both to move on. But I agree with you. I don't know if LaFleur's actually going to do it, man. I don't know if he's going to do it. But if he doesn't, if he doesn't, does he bring in another veteran defensive coach to almost have a backup in case it doesn't work this year?
That you'd like to say yes, but what message does that deliver?
Right.
Because everyone knows, including Joe Barry, that this is Plan B.
Yeah.
So at that point you're like, now am I really basically saying that? All right, I really don't have faith in you, but I like you, so I'm going to keep you on, but I'm going to give myself a backup plan. It's almost like dating this girl, and you're about to break up with her, but you don't want to break up with her until you've got that Plan B already teed up. And so it's just. It's an interesting situation. Again, for all the accolades I think Matt LaFleur deserves, I think this is the one area where can he make the tough call when it comes to people that work for him. And he talked about it. He talked about it in the presser. The bullseye, the Packers are no longer going to be the hunting. They are going to be the hunted. All right? They are going to have a bullseye on their back next year. They are probably going to be a hot pick in the offseason for Super Bowl favorite coming out of the NFC. And so they are going to have the bullseye on their back. And why put yourself through this if you have question marks at your DC? So it's going to be interesting. And I think that's the biggest decision that this Packer team, Matt LaFleur specifically, have to go through. Because, the other thing I was looking at, and every year you talk about, well, what free agents does Green Bay have to keep? And that list isn't that big. That list isn't that, wow, we've got to do everything we can to keep this guy. You've got John Runyon Jr., you've got Keyshawn Nixon, you've got A.J. Dillon, you've got Rudy Ford, you've got Darnell Savage, but none of those guys jump off the list as, wow, that's a tough one. I really want him on this roster. And so I think the roster, and again, a lot of draft choices, a lot of draft ammunition, I think that's going to play out. And I think Green Bay's going to be fine with that type of situation. But I think really this coaching decision is the biggest off-season question for this Green Bay Packer team.
You bring up some bad memories personally when you talk about being the backup option. I've been there. I've been the backup man. Nobody puts baby in the corner, though. You know what I mean? So nobody puts baby in the corner.
Well, hey. When you're off the air today, go get yourself another glass of Victory Scotch, and you can forget about all those bad memories I just brought up.
Yeah, right. No kidding, man. So, positive memories though. Looking back at this season, we had a little reflection Monday yesterday. I can't remember, Joe, another year where outside of a Super Bowl championship, there's been so many Packers fans optimistic. Like, the last 2 years, it's either been anger, like NFC Championship game, I can't believe Jimmy Garoppolo only threw 10 times and we lost that dang game. How did we lose Kevin King in the NFC Championship game? We lost the Lions in a playing game. A lot of times it's been anger. I can't remember another time outside of a Super Bowl win where at the end of the season there's been so much optimism and an excitement from a Packers fan base when the season's over with. And I get it and I understand it, but I was actually pleasantly surprised to see all that yesterday too.
Yeah, I think once the emotion of the game Saturday night subsided and played out, I think people started looking at this season for what it was. And I thought it was interesting, Captain, that you bring this up because Bill Huber, who has basically covered the Packers for the last 16 years, and he talked about this, that usually there's disappointment. And because the expectation with Aaron Rodgers truly was that it was Super Bowl or bust. Mm-hmm. And he said even the locker room had a different vibe to it. It was outside of the Super Bowl winning season, 2010, 2011. Huber said that this was the most positive locker room at the end of the season. And so I don't think it's just the fans. I think Green Bay realized, I think inside 1265, they realized, wow, we're catching lightning in a bottle. And it doesn't happen a lot. And you go back and you look back at that 2010-2011 season and you say, well, Green Bay is going to just run a string of Super Bowls now. And it didn't happen. But this Green Bay team, I think including that locker room, didn't think this was the year. All right, so it's really interesting because I think fans, I think the talking heads, I think the coaching staff, I think the players realize, hey, there's something cool happening here. And we've got a great locker room, and we've got a lot of talent on this team, and the arrow is pointing up. And I think in years past, I think it was, wow, we don't know how much longer that we're going to have Aaron Rodgers. We don't know, this, and it's an aging roster, and it's this, and so many question marks. So I think the fans are feeling it. I think the coaching staff is feeling it. But I think Bill Huber's article really spoke to that inside the locker room they're feeling this. So, yeah, there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. Now, again, I want to go back to what I said earlier. The bullseye is going to be on their back. Mm-hmm. The expectations need to be higher. The bar needs to be higher for everyone. For everyone inside that building, and I think fans have every right to have high expectations. I think Jordan Love arguably and I think most people would agree, a top 10, maybe top 5 quarterback now in the NFL, could be the best quarterback in the NFC. And so the expectations for him are going to go through the roof. But yeah, no, I'm with you. A lot of positive vibes, a lot of good stuff. Disappointment, no question, because I think Green Bay had caught lightning in a bottle. And I think when it was 21-14, and I had friends of mine texting me, and I did not respond, they were saying, it's going to happen. We are going to beat the 49ers. And I'm like, hold up. I've lived through the Seattle NFC Championship game. So yeah, a lot of good vibes, a lot of positive momentum. The key, though, is that they've got to come back and they got to put the work in. And this is the other test now of a young team. It's one thing to play the underdog role, especially when you're young, and have a chip on your shoulder. It's another thing to be, we got to bring our best because this is the Green Bay Packers, and they're a favorite to come out of the NFC. So it's going to be interesting. And again, another test for Matt LaFleur. How does he handle this locker room in the offseason and moving forward to get ready for a new season?
One of those decisions in the offseason, I want to ask you, do you bring back Darnell Savage?
Darnell Savage is the microcosm of the Joe Barry defense.
Great
because
comparison,
Savage,
yes. Yep.
Darnell Savage in the Dallas game, he was the highest-rated defensive player for the Green Bay Packers, according to PFF. All right? And then you look at what he does in the 49er game, and you're just like, wow, where did the guy from last week go? Now, I will say this, that I think part of the problem with Darnell Savage is the scheme and the system. I think Darnell Savage, when he plays closer to the line of scrimmage, I think he's a much better player. I think he lets his instincts go. When he has, playing that deep center field or even a cover 2 or whatever you got him in, and he's got time to think, I think that's when it clicks off for him. And what you don't want to have happen, because we've seen it before, where Green Bay drafts defensive backs, the scheme doesn't fit them, they're allowed to walk in free agency, and then they go on to have better careers. Micah Hyde, who's a free agent this offseason, Casey Hayward, they come to mind. And so what you don't want to have happen, because Darnell Savage coming out of Maryland, there was a lot of hype about him. There was, there was talk that he could be the next Nick Collins, the athletic safety that once the light turns on, man, he could be a jack of all trades back there, a Swiss Army knife, so to speak. So, it's going to be interesting what they do with Darnell Savage. My gut tells me he walks, because I think he gets a big offer, and I think Green Bay can rebuild that secondary with possibly going after another free agent out there and then rebuilding through the draft because of the draft capital they have. So I would say that he walks, but again, if a new defensive coordinator comes in and says, you know what, that's my guy, that's the guy I build this defense around, maybe then things are different.
A couple more here I want to get your thoughts on. Staying with the defense, does Carrington Valentine, does he open up next season, in your opinion, as a starting corner, or do you think it'll still be Eric Stokes and Jair?
I would probably start with Valentine. Mm-hmm. And I think, and it was interesting, both Watson and Stokes are going to see a specialist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison on the hamstring problem. They're both scheduled to make that trip. And so I just think when you've got those soft tissue types of things and you're an athlete and you look at the build of Eric Stokes and Christian Watson, same type of build, long and lean and muscular and highly athletic. If these hamstring problems are going to continue to be a problem for Stokes, you just can't count on them. And so I think the way that Valentine played this year and then that attitude that he brings back there, I think if Stokes is healthy, he's definitely in the mix. But I just think, how can you remove one of your better guys? Again, you never know training camp. Training camp battles are a good thing. Competition is a good thing. I always say that if you've got a guy who's locked into their position, that's not a good place to be. So you want to see this competition, but I would definitely say that right now, my starters are Alexander and Valentine.
Now we're getting close to draft talk. You're seeing a little bit more mock drafts come out here, Joseph, and if you're looking at some of them, you've got people pegging a tackle to the Packers high in the draft first round. My question to you, though, is did Walker do enough this year to earn that starting spot for the future where the Packers maybe don't need to draft a tackle in the first round?
I would say so, based on especially this late run. Everyone talks about, Jordan Love and the play of this offense the back half of the season, the last 4 games of the regular season, 3 games of the regular season, and then, the first couple of games of the playoffs. I would say so. I think he has definitely earned the right to be that starting tackle. And I think Green Bay has shown that you can find good tackles. Chad Clifton in the second round, David Bakhtiari in the fourth round. So I don't think you need to use your draft capital in the first round on a tackle. I think, and again, that was a big part of the game on Saturday night. This is an underrated part of the game because when Zach Tom went out, the Green Bay offense was not as productive. I think with Zach Tom and Rasheed Walker, I think you have your bookends. Now, you need that swing guy because I don't think Josh Nijman is it. I think someone's going to throw some money at Nijman to be a starting tackle in the NFL. And so I don't think he's the guy. So I think in the second or third round, when you've got capital, I mean, Green Bay has 2 second-round picks and 2 third-round picks. I think that's when they probably make that swing for the fences with, let's find our next tackle and see if he can be that dude. I think Green Bay looks probably elsewhere in the first round. If it were me right now, I would address the safety position. Mm-hmm. And we talked Darnell Savage. Well, you've also got Rudy Ford, who is a free agent. And you don't know what you're going to do with Keyshawn Nixon, who played the slot role this year a lot. So I think you have to address the secondary, specifically the safety position, with that. I believe it's, Captain, correct me if I'm wrong, 25th pick in the first round is what they're slotted for, correct?
Correct, yep.
So I think if it were me, and depending on what happens with Preston Smith, and obviously Enigbari, you don't know his timetable now coming back from that injury. So you could go edge rusher for the second straight year. But if it were me right now today, I would look at who's the best safety on the board. I would make the move there. I would look at the tackle position in the second or third round.
All right, Joe, before I let you go, just kind of since it was a reflection day yesterday, when you look back at this season, what is maybe the main thing or maybe a couple things that you will remember the most or really stand out to you from this season?
The chemistry that you saw between Jordan Love and this young wide receiver and tight end crew. And just you could see it before your very eyes. You could see the growth and knowing where guys were going to be and throwing in rhythm. And you could just see it. It was so evident starting the year to where the end of the year finished up for this team, just that chemistry. And I think that's the cool thing, and that's the Brian Gutekunst's vision. If I were to sit down with a beer with Goody, he'd say, I want to see this offense grow together. I want to see these young studs, these young wide receivers and tight ends and this quarterback grow together. And I think you really saw that, and it was so evident when when the switch went on, and I go back to the Pittsburgh game. And I think that's when the switch went on for this offense. I think that's when guys said, I get it now. I get the offense. I get the nuances of this. And when you can put together that chemistry and the mental part of the game, knowing where guys are going to be and trusting them, and you match that with physical ability, that's when magic happens. And I think that's when the Packers offense caught lightning in a bottle, and you could just see it. It was like a switch went on in that Pittsburgh game. And LaFleur even has talked about that game as being the game when he said, yes, the process is working. Believe in the process. And I think good things will happen. And I think that's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, man, we're going to have a fun offseason, though. I'm excited for this offseason.
Real quick, Captain.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And real quick, I just want to share this with you. My youngest son, Charlie, who's 19 years old, why does this loss against the 49ers hurt more? And I said, you know why I think? Because Packer fans were tired of the drama over the last several years. And also, this was a really fun team to watch. So I'm with you as far as this offseason. I think there's a lot to look forward to, a lot of positives, and a lot to build on, and a lot a lot of reasons for Packer fans to be optimistic. So I'm totally with you. I think it's going to be a great offseason.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Like I'm sure you saw it too, and I wish I would have saved it, but it was a couple weeks ago. One of the analytics things out there, ranked like who's got the most offseason capital or whatever. Green Bay was number 3 on that list too, and a lot of it was because of their draft picks on there.
Yep.
So to add that into the equation, man, I can't wait to get rolling with this.
Well, it won't be long, man. Probably for me, as soon as the Super Bowl is done, when I start really diving in and get ready for the combine. So
yep.
you and I know, man, it's coming around the corner. But reasons to be optimistic, be disappointed, but there is no way that you can count this loss Saturday night similar to the losses and the heartbreak of previous seasons, because we felt that might be the last go-around. Here it's just the beginning and not the end.
I completely agree. All right, dude, appreciate the time as always, man, and let's do it again next week, same time, okay, bud?
All right, brother. Take care, man.
Let's take a quick break, and let's talk some Badgers with R.J. Cardinal after these quick words. Winter is here in the Chippewa Valley, which means it's even more important to make sure you have a good vehicle to hit the winter roads of Wisconsin. Need that vehicle for this winter season? Look no further than Toyson Ford in Chippewa Falls. Whether it's a car, truck, or SUV from their new or used inventory, Toyson Ford has the vehicle you're looking for. Making sure you have a good, proper working vehicle is incredibly important this winter season, and Toyson Ford knows that. Just give them a visit today at 1000 Chippewa Crossing Boulevard and visit ToysonFord.com. Badgers taking on the Gophers, heading to the barn tonight. 13th ranked Badger men's basketball team. Dropping a couple spots in the latest polls here. Let's bring in our Badger analyst, Mr. R.J. Cardinal. R.J., have you ever been in the barn to watch a game?
No, I've been past it. That and Mariucci Arena, so two kind of iconic places within college sports I've never been to.
Yeah.
It's got that completely different feel with the kind of field house look, and then that raised court. So
right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think it'd be one to eventually make my way to taking a game there, but haven't had the opportunity yet.
Gotcha. So Badgers coming into this, the spread right now, it's only 3.5. Do you think that's a little low for the Badgers visiting Minnesota tonight?
Well, I mean, the Gophers are playing well this year. Both offensively and defensively. These two teams, I mean, are at least offensive, production-wise, scores and things like that are pretty close to one another. It's a game where it can end up being like a 10-point game, or I think it could be a close game. And I think that spread probably more along the lines of what is there because of what we saw on the trip to Penn State, rather than playing at home where they have been able to kind of be more the aggressor and outside of Tennessee, pretty much dominate teams. So I think that one's more of a road 3.5. They opened at 4.5. So it's gone down. So people are liking Minnesota, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. I mean, this college basketball season so far, RJ, has kind of been, and maybe in the last couple of weeks with all the upsets and just kind of craziness there. UConn, number 1, Purdue, North Carolina jumped up to number 3. They ended up defeating Wake Forest last night, even though they were down at the half there. But how would you describe the college basketball season for thus far? I mean, you got Kansas, who dropped down 4 spots. Auburn moved up 5 spots. It's kind of been all over the place so far.
I like parity across the board. So when you have multiple teams who you can't look at it and say the definitive number 1, let's just end it here and we'll take it and call it a year. I like that. Like when you can have a year where, Purdue loses to a 13 or higher seed in the first round for 3 straight years. when you can have like that kind of stuff. And sure, I'm picking on Purdue because they're in the Big Ten, and that's the first thing that popped into my mind. But like Virginia losing to a 16 seed and things like that, I like that better than when you could have an entire class of five stars. And I mean, people still do that, but it's nice when the wealth is spread around, and where people thought the schools would get richer as NIL has sunk in here. It seems it's actually creating parity, because one team can't pay all these, or one school's collective can't pay all these kids to come and play for them.
Last week when we talked to you, we were looking ahead to that Penn State game, and well, we know what happened after that Penn State game. When you see that game, and it was an 87 to 83 loss by the Badgers, and I know Greg Gard talked about defense, but when you look at that game, do you think that was a typical trap game for how well the Badgers have been playing up until that point?
Well, I mean, they were still shooting like 48% from the field, so I mean, it was, I think, defensively, I think it was, they weren't playing up to the standards that Wisconsin has. Penn State, across the board, was shooting 10% higher from the field, 10% higher from a three-point range. Sometimes you run into a buzzsaw and it gets you. I don't know if that's all Wisconsin's kind of poor defense on the night that led to that, but I mean, they were down 12-2 in the first 7 minutes of the game. So they did that to themselves, and I mean, you clawed yourself all the way back to be within 4 at half, and then it was an even game in the second half. So it was just a slow start really hurt them, and their defense really didn't seem to be able to get a stop when it needed one.
Another freshman, Big Ten freshman of the week for John Blackwell, RJ, and I know, the last couple weeks he's been in double-figure scoring. Indiana 12, Penn State 14. Before that was a little quiet there too. But just how pivotal has he been, in your opinion, as a freshman coming off the bench? How pivotal has he been to Wisconsin's success so far this season?
I mean, we talked about depth being a little more than it was in years past now. So, and in 3 of the last 5 games, he's been in double digits in points, and you right around 20 minutes averaging there. So he's averaging point a half, and it's good to have that kind of development coming from a freshman, and I think we probably kind of got the gist of it when Tom Izzo was like, I'm not sure how we let him get out of the state.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a big recruiting battle for Wisconsin, who not a lot of, and I shouldn't say recruiting win, not a battle, because not a lot of people were looking at him. And that's one of those we've talked about in the past, both for football and basketball. They get on kids early. They seem to hit on the kids that they get on early that nobody seems to think anything of, and then the kid ends up being all right and gets more looks as their high school career goes on. But it was too late because you came in too late on the whole thing. Having the kind of depth at the guard position there, where you can bring him in and have spells for Chucky and for Klesmit, and he's even pushing Connor Essegian there for playing time. And for the people who are like, he needs more minutes for Essegian, you can blame John Blackwell for that. You can blame Kamari McGee's defense for that. So it's one of those, having him as an option off the bench is awesome. And it's a great development, whereas, years past, we really didn't think we'd see freshmen kind of being this kind of contributor. But in this day and age, you have to start expecting freshmen to be this kind of player. And if you're not, your program isn't where it needs to be competitive.
The only other player I could think of, RJ, when you're talking about, freshmen coming off the bench and being a contributor, and you could tell me if I'm completely wrong, was like Sam Decker, back in 2012 when I was looking up his numbers. I mean, that year he averaged 9.6 points per game, and John Blackwell this year so far, 9.1 points per game.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's one there, too. That's the kind of kid you want. I think all of us are more familiar with Sam Decker because he's in the state, and we saw him just making everything in the state championship game.
Yeah.
And so you're just like, wow, pretty glad this kid's going to Wisconsin. And then you had all the detractors who were like, well, he's going to Sheboygan Lutheran, so what kind of competition is he actually playing? But I mean, it's a kid who, I'm not sure where else he would have gone because he had got the offer and committed real quickly there, if I remember correctly. But yeah, that's one of those. Those are the kind of kids I think hopefully can start seeing that this Wisconsin team can put up points when it has the right players in it, but you're still going to have the teams in this state even who allow their kids not to feel the way they need to think they can go to Wisconsin and be successful on the next level. But there's teams out there who are among the national powerhouses, and there's a lot of guys who are currently staying for their COVID year or their extra year or whatever they got because they're not going to be going pro either, at least in the United States. And I mean, it happens all over the place, and it kind of sucks that the big thing that people recruit against Wisconsin is their style of play that is easy to say when you don't coach it and you don't see a year like this year where Wisconsin's averaging over 70 points a game and one of the higher rates of points per possession, at least. I think if it's still up there, but they were doing well in that category to start the year too, and judging by scores they're still putting up, I can't say that's not a good thing. And in the Penn State loss, they were averaging 1.2 points per possession. So, I mean, if you're doing that and you're losing, at least your offense is kicking it into gear here.
Right. Moving over to some hockey. Let's start with the men's side. They had off this past week, but you're looking at their upcoming schedule here, RJ. They got Michigan. They're going to Michigan this coming weekend. Wisconsin earlier this season defeated Michigan, swept them both games. And then after that, you got Minnesota in Madison. Notre Dame's also on there, Ohio State. So for number 3, I think in the latest, was it the latest rankings, Wisconsin's number 3 on there? But
yep, had the week off and moved up, so that's always good.
Yeah, no doubt. So, but kind of a tough stretch for Wisconsin as they get close to wrapping up their regular season, it looks like.
Yeah, and you have Michigan coming in. I watched their Saturday night game, but I can't remember if they split with Michigan State last weekend. So it was you have a team that has some firepower coming in again because you just have to be able to outscore this Michigan team, which Wisconsin was able to do earlier in the year, winning 5-4 and then 2-1. So they played two totally different style of games there, but it's a game, a series that, I mean, fully capable of being able to sweep Michigan if you got your head on right, and hopefully a week of resting the legs will help out there. So traveling to Ann Arbor this weekend, Minnesota coming in next weekend, Notre Dame after that, Ohio State. I mean, it's going to be, you're running the gamut here back through your conference. And I mean, really the only team you're looking to get revenge on is getting swept by Michigan State, and that one's coming up at the end of first weekend of March. So I mean, we have series going here all the way now. So no more rest for the wicked, I guess. But most of these you got 3 road series and 2 home series, and that final series versus Michigan State's at home. So, a lot of points to be had here for the Badgers if they want to push to get the number 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament and have a home series for the first time in a long time in the playoffs for the conference crown. So, it's. I mean, all of them are important. Heck, you swept everybody but Michigan State, if I'm trying to remember correctly here. It's you just got to pile up wins here, and on the road probably will be a little tougher, but you've hung with Michigan and their speed before, and you've slowed them down. So it's definitely one we can go on the road, hope for a split, expect a sweep. Minnesota the same kind of way. I mean, earlier in the year, you dominate them 5-2, and then came back the next night and won 3-2. So it's series that are very winnable. We just have to hope that everything works out, and you can keep the legs, and hopefully injuries stay away and stay out of that penalty box.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And then the men's side. The women's side. We were just talking about the women's side, number 2 team in the country, going up against Minnesota State. And I know in the latest ones, Minnesota State was outside the rankings, but they did receive some votes, and it is in Minnesota Duluth. They just beat Minnesota State. I'm getting my days mixed up over here. So they got Minnesota Duluth coming up here for the number 1 or number 2 Wisconsin team, and that's going to be a tough one too because Minnesota Duluth, RJ, is number 7, I believe, in the latest rankings over here too. So that'll be a tough matchup for this Badger women's team. Yeah,
and you split with them in Madison in early December. So we were talking about coming back after the break, after splitting with Minnesota early in December as well, and then you come back and you've been dominant again in your 3 series back now here. So hopefully a little more confidence there, and you can head to Duluth and play well enough to. It's once again, WCHA is probably one of the better conferences for women's hockey. Hope for a split, but go in there expecting a sweep, and and St. Cloud coming back after that. So I mean, you're it's another one. It's just you're in the thick of it, going down to hopefully get some more points and put yourself in a good position for the WCHA tournament.
Before I let you go, RJ, anything new on the football side, transfer portal, or anything like that? Any big names or any names of interest that kind of popped up for you in the last week or so?
I didn't recall. We've seen some 2025s start committing, so there's that. And I guess we'll go through from there to see. With transfer portal and all that kind of stuff still kind of open for next season, it's a little odd to say. I haven't done really too much research on the 3 kids I've seen commit now for 2025. So the other big one is we're still looking for a DB's coach, and hopefully, somebody who can recruit as well as Colin Hischler could, as he left for Alabama last week.
Right, exactly. All right, he's R.J. Cardinal, Badger analyst, Zone and Madison. Dude, appreciate the time as always, man. That's going to do it for this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. As always, don't forget, be a friend, tell a friend to follow and subscribe to the Man Cave Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review so others can find the podcast. Until next time, I will talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.